Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together. Detailed lecture notes in English and Hindi, plus practice questions for prelims and mains, only on our Telegram channel. Link in description. Like and subscribe for more.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to get into the foundational blueprint for plant life, really going on a rapid but structurally sound expedition into how flowering plants work internally.
Exactly.
But before we start digging into the tissues, I really need to take a quick moment, a huge shout out, and a genuine thank you to all of our existing members and subscribers.
Absolutely.
It is truly your support that lets us do this, that gives us the time to produce these high-yield resources.
We couldn't do it without you.
And for you listening right now, if you're finding this useful for your studies, especially for something as high stakes as the UPSC, please do us a small favor.
It helps a lot.
Just take a second to like this deep dive, share your valuable comments, and subscribe to the channel, which is Simplified UPSC by PPP. And if you can, please consider joining our paid membership on YouTube. We really do rely on that support.
We do. And our mission today is all about that focus on structure. We're tackling the core concepts from NCERT Class 11 Biology, Chapter 6, the anatomy of flowering plants. And we're not just here for, rote memorization. We want to get to the why. Understanding the internal anatomy, the cells, their arrangement, it's the only way to really grasp the physiology.
How things actually work.
Precisely. How plants absorb minerals, why water moves one way, all of that. We're building the house before we start talking about the plumbing.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Plant anatomy, we're talking about the internal structure. It's a hierarchy, right? You start with cells, they form tissues, and then those tissues build organs like roots and stems.
Yep, that's the progression.
And a key thing right off the bat is that these blueprints, they're not universal. The internal structure for dicots and monocots can be really, really different.
That difference speaks directly to function. And the first way we classify them, the simplest way, is based on whether the cells can still divide.
Okay.
So you get two massive groups. First, the meristematic tissues. Think of these as perpetually young, always dividing. And then you have the permanent tissues.
The ones that have, what, matured?
Exactly. They've differentiated, they've matured, and they've lost that ability to divide. The meristems are the real engines of growth.
So when we talk about growth, it's about where these meristems are and what they're actually adding. We hear about primary and secondary growth. How do the meristems shape the plant?
Well, primary growth is all about getting taller. It's verticality, making the plant taller and the root system longer. This is all driven by the apical meristems.
Which are found at the tips, right?
At the very tips, yes, the tips of the root and the shoot, and also something called intercalary meristems. Think of young green shoots, blades of grass. That elongation is all primary growth.
So it's building the basic framework.
It establishes that initial structure, yeah. The capacity for absorption and for photosynthesis.
But, a plant can't just be tall and flexible forever. At some point, it needs to be strong.
And that's where secondary growth comes in.
Yeah.
This is about adding girth, adding rigidity.
Getting thicker.
Getting thicker, exactly. And this is facilitated by the lateral meristems, mainly the vascular cambium and the cork cambium.
And that's what gives us wood, essentially.
That is what gives you the woody trunk you see in most dicot trees and gymnosperms. When you look at an old oak tree, what you're seeing is, well, centuries of secondary growth.
It's a huge adaptation.
A massive one. The structure changes from simple and pliable to incredibly complex and load-bearing. It's all about survival in some really challenging environments.
That coordination between cells is just amazing. And it leads us right to the complex tissues. What exactly makes a tissue complex versus simple?
The definition is actually quite elegant. Complex tissues are made up of more than one type of cell. But, and this is the crucial part, all those different cell types work together to perform one single integrated function.
Like a specialized team.
The perfect analogy. And the two major ones are, of course, Xylem and Phloem, the plant's transport infrastructure.
Let's start with xylem, the water conductor. It moves water and minerals, but you also mentioned it provides mechanical strength. So what are the components that do that?
So you have four main components. There are tracheids, vessels, xylem fibers, and xylem parenchyma.
Okay.
The tracheids and vessels, we call those the tray tree elements. They are the actual plumbing. They're dead cells when they're mature, which allows them to form these long, continuous tubes.
And the others?
Xylem parenchyma are the only living cells in there. They're mainly for storage. But the really interesting distinction is between the vessels and the tracheids. It's about efficiency versus safety.
How so?
Vessels are like large, efficient pipelines, great for moving lots of water fast. but they are vulnerable to air bubbles, what we call embolisms, especially in dry or cold weather. Tracheids are smaller, so they're less efficient, but they're much, much safer.
And that detail leads to a really critical point, one that often shows up on exams.
Absolutely. And you have to remember this. Gymnosperms lack vessels in their xylem.
So they only have tracheids.
They rely entirely on tracheids. It's an older, evolutionarily safer system. This suggests an adaptation where they're favoring safety, avoiding a catastrophic air bubble over maximum transport speed.
Which makes sense for the kinds of environments they live in, like cold or high-altitude places.
Exactly. That one anatomical fact tells you a whole lot about their entire ecology.
That is a deep insight. Now, we have to talk about how the primary xylem is arranged, because that tells you if you're looking at a stem or a root. First, what are Protoxylem and Metaxylem?
This is a high-value distinction. The Protoxylem is the very first primary xylem that's formed. It's usually smaller because the cells around it are still stretching and growing.
Okay, so it gets a bit squashed.
In a sense, yeah. The metaxylem forms later, after all that elongation is done, so its vessels or tracheids are typically larger and undistorted.
So we're looking for the position of that smaller first form Protoxylem, if it's pointed towards the center, towards the pith. What is that called and where do we find it?
That arrangement with the Protoxylem on the inside is called endarch, and it is the characteristic arrangement in stems.
Endarch and stems. Okay, so what's happening in the roots?
In the roots, it's reversed. The Protoxylem is on the outside toward the periphery, and the metaxylem is internal. We call this the exarch arrangement.
And this isn't just a random pattern. There has to be a functional reason for this.
A critical one. Remember, in the root, water has to come in from the outside, from the soil, and move inwards.
So how does that exarch arrangement actually optimize that? How does it help?
Well, think about the journey the water takes. The exarch arrangement puts the smallest conducting elements, the protoxylem, right there on the outside, near the cortex where water is entering.
Okay.
Then, the water funnels inward toward the center, where you have the metaxylem, the largest, most efficient, strongest pipes. They are perfectly positioned in the center to handle the immense tension and the upward pull of water needed to get it all the way to the top of the plant.
Ah, I see. So it's like a funnel into the main highway. It's an engineering marvel.
It really is, designed for efficient intake and high-tension transport.
That makes perfect sense. The architecture is completely optimized for the job it needs to do. Okay, let's move to the other half of the transport system. Phloem.
Right. Phloem's job is to transport photosynthates. Basically food, sugars mostly.
From the leaves where they're made.
Usually from the leaves, yeah, to every other part of the plant that needs energy. Areas of growth, storage organs, you name it. And structurally, you'll always find the phloem on the outer side of the xylem in a vascular bundle.
So what are the key components of phloem in, say, angiosperms?
You've got 4 parts: sieve tube elements, companion cells, phloem parenchyma, and phloem fibers.
And unlike xylem, these are living cells.
Mostly, yes. The sieve tube elements are the actual transport tubes, but interestingly, they don't have a nucleus when they're mature.
So how do they stay alive?
They're metabolically supported by the cell right next to them, the companion cell. They're linked together, and the companion cell does all the heavy lifting, loading, and unloading the sugars. It's a fantastic example of a complex tissue, that synergy between 2 different cell types.
Okay, we have the definitions down. Let's put this into practice. Let's take the case study from the sources. The anatomy of a dicot root, like a sunflower root. If we take a cross-section, what are the layers, starting from the outside?
The very outermost layer is the epiblema. You can also just call it the root epidermis. And what's crucial here is that some of these epiblema cells stick out. They form unicellular root hairs.
Just one cell.
One single, long, thin cell. And this tiny structure is what creates the massive surface area for water absorption from the soil. It all happens by diffusion right there.
And then inside that?
Beneath that, you have a large multi-layered region called the cortex. It's mostly made of parenchyma cells, and it stores food and helps shuttle that water inwards toward the vascular parts.
It's amazing that all of that complex xylem plumbing we talked about is fed by this simple single-celled extension. This structure really informs the whole idea of transport direction, doesn't it?
Precisely. We talked about the exarch arrangement being optimized. Well, when you link this structure to the physiology, the directionality is everything. Xylem transport is, by definition, always unidirectional.
Always up.
Always up, from the roots to the aerial parts of the plant. It's driven by transpiration pull and root pressure. It's a one-way street.
But phloem is completely different. It's much more flexible.
Fundamentally different. Phloem transport is bidirectional. It's all governed by what we call the source-sink relationship.
Source and sink.
A source is anywhere that's producing or releasing sugar, like a mature leaf doing photosynthesis. A sink is any place that's using or storing sugar, a growing bud, a developing fruit, the roots,
So the direction can change.
all the time.
Yeah.
In the summer, a root might be a sink, so the flow is downward. But after winter, that same root might mobilize its stored starch to feed a new shoot in the spring. Suddenly, the root becomes the source, and the flow is upward. Phloem has to be flexible because the plant's needs change constantly.
But that conceptual difference, unidirectional versus bidirectional, that is exactly the kind of thing the UPSC exam targets. Let's try to connect some of the other concepts from the sources to see how this core anatomy underpins everything.
If we start with the mechanical side, we mentioned secondary growth, vascular cambium, all that stuff that builds rigidity. This links directly to that point in the sources about equatorial forests.
Right, the tall, closely packed trees.
Exactly. The presence of those tall, closely set trees with crowns forming a canopy, that immense height, that competition, it absolutely requires extremely well-developed secondary growth. It requires the strong mechanical tissues we discussed so those trees can compete for light.
And there are also links to other organisms like biofertilizers.
Yes, the source mentioned nostoc. It's a cyanobacterium, and it's used as a biofertilizer because it can perform nitrogen fixation.
Pulling nitrogen from the air.
Right. And that process relies on an enzyme called nitrogenase. This brings us right back to structure-protecting function. Nitrogenase is destroyed by oxygen. It needs anaerobic conditions.
So how does a plant manage that?
Well, in symbiotic relationships, like rhizobium in legume root nodules, the plant creates a structural defense. It produces an oxygen-scavenging compound called leg hemoglobin. The actual anatomy of that root nodule creates a biochemical shield to protect that delicate metabolic pathway.
It's incredible how far a basic understanding of cell arrangement takes you. We started with meristems, moved through transport, and now we're seeing how it affects everything from forest ecology to, complex biochemistry.
It really shows you that the plant body is a totally integrated system. I think we've successfully unpacked that structural framework, highlighted the roles of growth tissues, and really nailed down the distinction between endarch and exarch organization.
So as our final thought for you to chew on, building on everything we've just discussed, if the main mechanical strength in a stem comes from secondary growth, from that vascular cambium adding wood, and if the exarch root design is perfect for resisting water tension, what kind of structural challenge does a monocot plant face? Given that most monocots completely lack a vascular cambium and therefore can't have true secondary growth.
Think about that. No permanent increase in girth. So how do they achieve mechanical stability, especially in something huge like a palm tree? It's a fascinating challenge of structure versus environment.
A wonderful thought to leave you with, connecting anatomy right back to ecological necessity. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope this analysis helps you translate these structural facts into some high-scoring conceptual insights for your exams.
We hope so.
And if you enjoyed this material, please make sure you like this deep dive, leave us a comment, maybe tell us the most surprising functional insight you gained, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Simplified UPSC by PPP.
Your support is vital.
It really is. It helps us keep creating this essential, focused content. And if you're able, please consider joining our paid membership. Until the next deep dive, keep learning.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Telegram and Instagram. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.